The rain had that thin, steady patience you only notice when everything else has stopped. A tarp slapped like a tired bird. Someone's lighter clicked once and died. In the glow of a headlamp, a brass compass spun. Not the lazy, blunted roll of an old needle, but a quick, decisive snap. And then it held, pointing not toward the ridge or the trail, but inland, toward a stand of trees the map named only with a contour line. The radio on the morning watch crackled. "Alyssa, you there? The needles." And then nothing. Silence swallowed the band.
Do you feel that? The moment when a tool you've trusted your whole life betrays the rules you live by? That is where tonight begins. Find somewhere dark and quiet. Put your headphones on. Listen closely now. Tonight's story is called The Compass That Lies.
Alyssa Kim had been a ranger long enough that the mountain made sense to her the way a familiar hand makes sense. She knew the trail knots and the way the wind preferred certain gullies. She knew which cairns were tourists' work and which had been placed by people who knew how to survive a winter. Smart, steady, and practical. Search and rescue was both her job and her way of apologizing to a place that had once taken more than it had given her.
The range itself is a contradiction. Granite shoulders that wear the sky smooth, valleys that hold water like a secret, ridgelines where the wind explains everything and nothing. Hikers come for solitude and leave footprints that vanish with the first storm. Lately, though, footprints stopped being enough to explain the losses. People began to walk away from camps with full packs and leave behind their maps, their phones, sometimes their favorite mug. Their compasses, pocket compasses, compass watch faces, a cheap keychain from a gas station, were found snapped to bearings that made no sense on the map, always pointing toward places people had tried to forget. The first time Alyssa saw one of those compasses was a morning cold enough to make the radio hiss. A pack lay half buried under brush, zipper open like a mouth. Inside, a thermos, a trail logbook, a scarf knotted the wrong way. The needle on the compass inside the pocket was stubborn, no drift, no dithering, pointed inland, toward a valley that the map labeled with the old name of a logging camp. The ranger who found it wrote, "Compass true to needle, but not true to map."
At first, everyone rationalized. Metal interference, an unshielded phone, a magnet in someone's boot. Theories were practical, because the world wants practical answers. But then another pack turned up, and another compass pointing the same impossible way. The pieces, small, ordinary pieces, began to sketch a pattern. Needles pointed not to north, but to places that matched no trailhead, to old homesteads carved out of the hill a century ago, to a depression in the trees where a family had once buried what couldn't be carried. The bearings were like memory, made mechanical.
Here's where it gets interesting. The more you listen to these cases, the more human they become. A diary page folded inside a boot. I thought I could outrun it. A voicemail saved on a phone. Tell Mom then static. A cairn rearranged so the tallest stone pointed like a thumb at a stand of young firs. The pattern was small, slow, and insistent. People were circling back, sometimes literally, and the needles kept time with something nobody had named yet.
Alyssa's notes started like any ranger's. Coordinates, timestamps, search radius. But the margins filled with different marks. A little sketch of a compass face. An underline on a name. A question. Why would she go back to the old logging road? She'd seen grief in the field before. People who refused to accept loss and wandered until the mountain let them forget. This felt different. It felt as if the land were asking a question back, and the needle was the answer. The night remembers.
I read transcripts of interviews. A husband saying his wife had been acting like a person trying to find something they'd lost long ago. A friend mentioning a recurring dream of a wooden bridge collapsing. A teenager who followed the compass to a clearing and found a child's shoe she'd never owned but had pictured since childhood. Those confessions were small tragedies folded into the landscape, private things the wild somehow echoed back. People were following a needle that wanted them to remember, whether they wanted to or not.
Alyssa could keep cataloging evidence from the perimeter, but she had a reputation for doing what others only wrote about. One late afternoon, when the rain let up and the pines smelled like old stories, she took a compass from a drawer, a cheap brass thing with a scratched glass, and decided to follow it. Not because she believed in haunted needles, but because she believed in closure, in the kind of answers maps and radios often couldn't give. "This is where things change," she told her partner, and then she stepped off the trail. "This is the moment."
What happens when you choose curiosity over instruction is simple in one sense and irreversible in another. The trees hunched closer. The sound of the wind felt like breath in an ear. The compass needle clicked, not metaphorically, but actually clicked. Small mechanical taps the way an old watch ticks, and each click lined up with a memory slipping into place. She walked toward a knoll where the ground had been disturbed 15 years earlier in a storm. There was, briefly, the sense that the mountain was waiting on her decisions, like an old friend cleared for confession.
The climax isn't a single scream or a monstrous reveal. It is the subtle unspooling of certainty. Alyssa found a circle of stones, small and recent. Each one turned so their faces suggested a compass rose pointing inward. The compasses she carried, hers, the ones she'd collected from found packs, aligned. When she set them on a flat rock, the needle spun and then held, not toward a place on map, but like fingers tracing the outline of an absence. A child's laugh, an apology unsaid, a promise broken. The landscape wasn't showing her where to go. It was showing her what had been left.
And then something shifted. Not a ghost or a thing with teeth, but a decision. Some people followed the needle and never returned. Others followed and came back saying only that the mountain had given them what they'd asked for and taken something else in return. On her recorder, Alyssa's breath is a loud thing. You can hear her choose. You can hear what following a needle costs. Sometimes a memory, sometimes a year bruised from within. She took a photo of the circle. She left an extra stone. She left a note in her pack. If you follow this, bring more than curiosity. When the search teams widened their skirts for weeks after, they found traces, disturbed soil, footprints converging on places that made no logistical sense, and occasionally a personal item, an old watch, a ribbon, placed as if left as an offering. The official reports were careful, inconclusive, terrain hazards, voluntary disappearance. Those phrases are quiet ways of saying we don't have an explanation. Families, though, kept quieter truths, a note stitched into a jacket that read, "I had to see it again," or a voicemail that ended with a laugh and then a sob. The mountain collected confessions, like other places keep fossils.
People asked Alyssa whether any of this was supernatural. She would smile in that way that says there's more than one kind of answer. Maybe not supernatural, she told a reporter. Maybe the compass is just honest. Maybe it's pointing at what we refuse to carry inside ourselves any longer. She meant the needle as mirror. It reflects not the magnetic field, but the pull of something you left in the dark. That idea terrified some and comforted others.
There were consequences. Volunteer searchers refused certain areas. Hikers learned to tuck compasses away. Local shops added small disclaimers to sold gear. If you feel compelled to go off route, turn back.
The community stitched warnings into trailhead signs that read like gentle superstitions. A support group formed for people who returned altered, quiet, with eyes like someone who had ridden a storm and disembarked on a different shore. These were not always dramatic changes. Often they were small, like the way a person touches a doorknob differently after a long absence. The mountain's influence lasted.
A few months later, a compass was found under the floorboards of a house in town. Not buried in the woods, not at the edge of the logging road, under a child's bed, wrapped in a sock. Its needle pointed as if it had never stopped, steady, pointing to a corner of the house that faced the hills. No note, no other clues, just the small, stubborn insistence of metal and magnet. The family left it on the mantel. Sometimes late at night, someone would notice the needle and feel a memory slide up their spine like a cold hand.
What do we make of a compass that lies? Tools are mirrors. They show us at least two things: where the world pulls and how we pull back. In this story, the compass became the simplest tribunal for guilt and grief. Follow it, and you might find what you lost. Ignore it, and you might keep your life intact, but unfinished. There is no single moral, only choices and their echoes. That is the cruelty and the mercy of wilderness. It doesn't compel you. It only gives you the chance to answer a question you may not have known you were asking.
If you are listening from a place with a window, look at the dark beyond it for a moment. Imagine a needle under glass, patient as a clock. Imagine it pointing toward a place you thought you'd buried. Some of the missing are still missing. Some returned bearing a secret like a scar. The mountain kept its stories, and in exchange, added a new rule to the map. Never trust a tool that answers questions you haven't asked aloud.
A quick note: because these stories involve real danger, don't try to replicate what you heard here. If you get lost or find something worrying in the field, call local search and rescue. Tell someone where you're going. Pack the basics. Respect the people who do this work. We spoke with rangers, family members, and volunteers. Names were changed and details consolidated to protect privacy. If this episode raised concerns for you about someone you love, reach out to local resources. You're not alone.
If you liked walking this ridge with me, then tell someone who listens in the dark. Share the episode. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. We find these stories through reporting, listener tips, and a lot of hiking boots. If you have a tip about a place that feels like it remembers too much, send it to our production email in the episode notes.
If you're still here, the story followed you to the end. Take a breath. Look around your room. Make sure everything is exactly where you left it. I'm Samnang. Until next time, check the corners. Keep your eyes open. And your lights, maybe not too bright. Good night.